The human woke slowly, feeling a sharp ache in his head. His vision was blurry, the world around him spinning. When his eyes finally focused, he realized he was lying on a cold metal bed. The room was dim, lit only by a few glowing strips on the walls. Everything smelled strange, like burnt metal and herbs. He tried to move, but found his wrists and ankles strapped down with smooth bands. Not rope, they were warm, almost alive. Like they could tighten at any second. A soft sound made him turn his head. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was a young alien girl, tall and slender, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the light. Her eyes were large, bright, and carried a strange glow that made it hard to look away. She wore a white coat, long and clean, with strange symbols stitched along the sleeves. In her hands, she held a small metallic device about the size of a human heart, and it hummed quietly. She stopped beside the bed, looked down at him, and spoke in a calm, clear voice. "Relax, human. This won't hurt," she said. Tilting her head slightly, her voice was soft but carried a tone that made his heart beat faster. It wasn't fear exactly, but it wasn't comfort either. The words felt like both a promise and a warning. The human swallowed, trying to keep his voice steady. What is that?" he asked, nodding toward the device. The alien girl smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "This will make you better," she replied simply, as if that explained everything. Better. He didn't feel sick, just hurt from the crash, but something about the way she said it made him uneasy. Her gaze drifted briefly toward the door, then back to him, almost like she was checking for someone, or making sure they were alone. She stepped closer, the humming device now inches from his chest. The human's muscles tensed, but he couldn't move much. A wave of warmth from the device brushed against his skin, making him shiver. She glanced at his face, as if reading his reaction. Then, without another word, she pressed a small button on the side. The hum grew louder, and a faint blue light spread across its surface. The warmth became stronger, pushing deep into his body. It didn't hurt, but it felt wrong, like his insides were being rearranged. He tried to pull back, but the straps kept him in place. "You need this," she said quietly, almost to herself. Her hands moved with practiced skill, guiding the device in slow circles over his chest and arms every time it passed over a spot. The muscles there felt stronger, lighter. "What are you doing to me?" he demanded. The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked into his eyes for a long moment. Then she leaned slightly closer and whispered, "Fixing you." The human didn't like the sound of that. Fixing him for what? And why did she seem in such a hurry? He noticed now that her movements were quick but careful, like she was trying to finish something before time ran out. Her eyes kept darting toward the door again. Finally, he asked, "Who are you hiding from?" For the first time, her expression broke. A flicker of worry crossed her face, but she didn't answer. Instead, she placed the device against his ribs, and he felt another rush of heat through his bones. His breath caught. It wasn't pain, but it was too intense to ignore. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered once. The girl froze, her ears twitching toward the sound of footsteps outside. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't move, no matter what happens." She set the device down and reached for a thin sheet from a nearby table. In one quick motion, she draped it over him. It was warm to warm, and he realized it was masking his body heat. The footsteps came closer, louder, stopping right outside the door. The girl straightened, forcing a smile as the door slid open with a hiss. Two tall alien guards stepped in, their armor dark and heavy. Their eyes scanned the room before settling on her. "We were told a human was brought here," one said in a deep voice. She shrugged, her voice calm. "No human here, only my work." The guards looked around but didn't come too close. After a tense moment, they left, Taya, and the door sealed shut again. The girl let out a quiet breath, then pulled the sheet off him. She picked up the device again and looked at him with urgency. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice sharper now. "You need to trust me, or you won't survive what's coming." He stared at her, his heart pounding. Whatever this procedure was, it was no longer about just healing him. It was about preparing him for something he didn't understand, and as the hum of the device grew louder again, he realized he might not have a choice. The device's glow sank deeper into his skin, and the strange warmth began to spread through his whole body. His fingertips tingled, his heartbeat felt faster, sharper, like every sound in the room was suddenly clearer. He clenched his jaw, unsure if this was helping him or breaking him from the inside. The alien girl's face was calm, but her hands moved with a speed that betrayed her tension. She murmured something in her own language, words he couldn't understand, but the tone was urgent. When she glanced toward the door again, he knew whatever she was doing had to be finished before someone returned. He tried to speak, but his throat felt tight. It was as if the air itself resisted his voice. The hum from the device grew louder, almost blending with the pounding in his ears. Then, without warning, a sharp flash of light shot through his vision. For a moment, he couldn't see the room at all. Lonely, strange patterns of blue and gold moving like waves in his mind. When his sight returned, the girl was staring at him with an unreadable expression. "You are reacting faster than expected," she said softly, almost to herself. "What are you doing to me?" He managed to ask. Her eyes flicked up to his, and for the first time, he thought he saw fear there, not of him, but of something else. "I am making you ready," she whispered. Ready for what? She didn't say, and the silence after her words made him uneasy. She pressed the device to his shoulder, and the muscles there tightened instantly. It felt stronger, denser, as though something inside had been rebuilt in seconds. He jerked against the straps, but they only tightened slightly, reminding him he wasn't going anywhere outside. Faint metallic sounds echoed through the walls, shuffling, distant clanks, and then something heavier. The girl's hands hesitated for only a second before moving faster. She unplugged the device from a small port in the wall and attached a thin wire to it. The hum changed pitch, becoming a steady vibration that seemed to run through his bones. "Almost there," she said, but her voice was less confident now. The warmth turned into a slow pulse, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. Each beat felt stronger, each breath easier. It was as if his body was being tuned like a machine. Then a loud crash shook the room. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the girl froze. Her eyes darted to the door, and she whispered something under her breath. She reached up and removed one of his restraints without warning. "Hold this," she said, placing the device into his free hand. It vibrated in his palm, almost alive, before he could ask why. She turned to the wall and pressed her fingers against a hidden panel. A small drawer slid open, revealing strange crystal shards and a tiny vial of glowing liquid. She scooped them up quickly, stuffing them into her coat. "Do not let go of that device," she told him, her tone sharp and urgent now. "It is the only thing keeping your body stable." He didn't understand, but the way she spoke made him obey without thinking. The crashing outside grew louder, and a faint alarm began to sound. Her hands moved to the remaining restraints, releasing him faster than he expected. His legs felt strange when they touched the floorlight, but steady, as if they'd been rebuilt. She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward a narrow side door. He hadn't noticed before. As they slipped through, the hum of the device in his hand felt stronger. The corridor beyond was narrow, lined with pipes and flickering lights. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something burnt. The girl moved quickly, keeping close to the wall, her head turning at every sound. She didn't speak, and he didn't ask questions. Somewhere ahead, a deep mechanical rumble echoed, followed by a heavy thud. The girl stopped suddenly, her grip on his arm tightening. She turned her head slightly toward him and whispered, "If they see you now, it's over. Before?" He could ask who they were. The corridor lights went dark in the silence. He could hear slow footsteps approaching. Not many, just two, but each step was deliberate. Heavy and far too close. The girl pressed him back against the wall, her own body tense beside his. The hum from the device was the only sound between them. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. The footsteps grew louder, each one echoing down the narrow corridor like a drumbeat. The girl's grip on his arm tightened until it almost hurt, but she didn't move. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, watching the shadowed corner ahead. The human could feel the vibration of the device in his hand growing stronger, as if it sensed danger. The air was cold and heavy, and the silence between each step made his skin crawl. Then the figures appeared, to tall shapes clad in dark armor, their faces hidden behind metal masks. A faint red glow shone from their eye slots. Sweeping the corridor like scanning lights, the human's heart pounded. But his breathing was steady, sharper than he remembered. The girl pressed a finger to her lips without looking at him. One of the armored figures paused, turning its head. Slightly, as if listening, the hum of the device in his hand almost seemed to call to them. The girl noticed too, and she reached over, sliding her palm over the device to muffle the sound. The vibration dulled, and the figure turned away, continuing forward. They passed without a word, their heavy footsteps fading into the distance. The girl didn't relax right away. She stayed still until the silence returned. Only then did she let go of his arm and whisper. They were hunters. The word made his stomach twist. Hunters for Wator, who wasn't hard to guess. She began moving again, faster this time, guiding him through the winding corridor. Pipes rattled overhead, and the dim lights buzzed as they passed under them. The human realized he could see details in the shadows better than before, the texture of the metal walls, the small flecks of dust in the air. Everything felt sharper. They reached a locked hatch. The girl knelt beside it. Pulling a thin rod from her coat, she pressed it against the hatch, and with a faint hiss, the lock released. She pulled it open and waved him inside. The space beyond was small, almost like a storage compartment. It smelled faintly of oil and stale air. She stepped in after him and closed the hatch behind them, sealing the light out completely in the darkness. Her voice was low, almost urgent. "What I started back there isn't finished," she said. "If we don't complete it, your body will fail." He stared at her, trying to read her tone. But in the dark, all he had was her voice. "What happens if we do finish it?" he asked. There was a long pause before she answered. "Then you will be faster, stronger, and harder to kill than any human alive." The weight of her words sank in. This wasn't just medical treatment. It was something else. An upgrade. A change, maybe even something dangerous. "Why me?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, he heard her shifting, the faint sound of her coat rustling as she searched through her pockets. When her voice came again, it was softer, almost reluctant. "Because they're coming for you and I. I don't want them to win." Before he could ask who they were, the sound of metal scraping against metal echoed from outside the hatch. The girl's breathing quickened, but she didn't panic. Instead, she reached for the device, still in his hand, and pressed her thumb against a hidden panel. It lit up again, brighter than before. "Hold still," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. The warmth surged back into his body, stronger than ever. Outside, the scraping stopped, followed by a loud metallic bang that made the hatch shudder. They had been found. The bang against the hatch echoed through the small compartment, making the metal walls vibrate. The girl didn't waste a second. Grabbing his wrist and yanking him toward a second, narrower panel at the back. Her movements were fast, sharp. As if she had rehearsed this escape many times, the device in his hand pulsed harder, its light spilling across the cramped space. He could feel that warmth crawling up his arm and into his chest, making his heartbeat stronger, steadier, behind them. Another slam shook the hatch, this time bending the metal slightly inward. The girl pushed him toward the panel, pressing her palm against a hidden sensor. A hiss of escaping air filled the space as the panel slid open, revealing a thin maintenance shaft. It was barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. "Go," she ordered, her voice low but fierce. He hesitated only a moment before pulling himself inside, the cold metal scraping against his arms. She followed right after, sealing the panel behind them. The darkness in the shaft was total, the only light coming from the faint glow of the device. They moved quickly, their breathing loud in the tight space. The shaft twisted left, then down, forcing them to slide on their stomachs. Every movement sent a faint echo through the metal. The girl whispered for him to move slower, to keep the noise down. But the banging from behind was getting closer, metal on metal, as someone, or something, followed them. He could hear it scraping along the shaft, steady and unhurried. It wasn't just chasing, it was hunting. Finally, the shaft opened into a small control room. The air here was warmer, filled with the hum of machinery. Strange alien consoles lined the walls, each blinking with unreadable symbols. The girl climbed out behind him and quickly locked the shaft entrance. Her hands moved across the console with practiced ease, shutting down certain lights, rerouting power. She was making the room invisible to outside scanners. "Sit," she told him, pointing to a metal chair in the corner before he could protest. She was already attaching the device to a cable hanging from the ceiling. The light from the device grew brighter, flooding the room in pale blue. She stepped close, her hands on his shoulders, and met his eyes. "We finish this now," she said. Her tone carried no hesitation. But there was something else in it, desperation. Maybe even fear. She placed the device back on his chest, and this time the warmth became a surge of fire. It burned through every nerve, making his vision flash white. His muscles tensed, his breath caught in his throat. He gripped the sides of the chair until his knuckles ached. She kept speaking in that calm, steady voice, telling him to breathe, to stay conscious. Outside, muffled thuds echoed. Someone was still searching. The fire in his chest shifted, becoming a deep, powerful thrum that felt like it was syncing with his heartbeat. Then the banging came again, this time against the main door to the control room. The girl's eyes flicked to the door, then back to him. "Almost there," she whispered, though he wasn't sure if she was talking to him or to herself. The door groaned as whatever was outside began forcing it open. He could see a faint red light spilling through the gap. The girl's hands moved faster, the device's glow growing so bright it painted every corner of the room in light. With one final pulse, the heat inside him peaked, then snapped into something else entirely. Every sound, every breath, every vibration in the room became clear. The door's final lock broke with a loud crack. The door burst open with a metallic scream, shards of broken locks clattering across the floor. Two armored hunters stepped inside, their red visor lights cutting through the pale blue glow of the device. They were taller than any human, their movements slow but deliberate. The girl didn't step back. She stayed right beside him, one hand still gripping the device pressed to his chest. Her voice was calm but tight. "Not yet. Hold it just a little longer." The hunters raised their weapons, long black spears with crackling energy tips. The sound of the energy hum made the hairs on his neck rise. His body, however, felt different, solid, alive, sharper than ever. Every detail of the room was crystal clear now. The slow inhale of the hunters, the faint drip of oil from a pipe above, even the steady rhythm of the girl's heartbeat beside him. Then the device gave one final pulse, and the warmth spread. through him like a living wave. The girl yanked it away and tossed it aside, her eyes locking with his. "Now," she said simply. He moved before thinking. The first hunter lunged forward. But the human's body reacted faster than his mind. He grabbed the spear mid-thrust, twisting it with a strength that startled even himself. The weapon tore free from the hunter's hands, and in one fluid motion, he spun and slammed the shaft into the creature's chest. It stumbled back, crashing into the wall with a deep metallic thud. The second hunter charged, swinging its weapon downward. The human sidestepped, feeling the rush of air as the energy tip slammed into the floor, burning a hole straight through the metal. The girl had moved too. Pulling a small pistol-like device from her coat, she fired once, a silent flash of light hitting the second hunter. In the side of the head, its visor flickered and it staggered. The human stepped in, grabbing the front of its armor and hurling it backward into its partner. The two armored bodies crashed together in a heap, struggling to rise. His own breathing was steady. No sign of exhaustion in his muscles. He felt stronger. Faster, every movement effortless. The girl didn't smile, but there was a sharp focus in her eyes. "They'll send more," she said, already pulling him toward the side exit. The control room's alarms had begun to blare now, a deep, pulsing tone that echoed through the walls. The hunters behind them began to recover, but the human didn't look back. They slipped through the narrow door into another winding corridor that sloped downward. The air here was damp, smelling faintly of rust and chemicals. Every step echoed, and he could hear more movement in the distance. The girl was fast, but he matched her pace without effort. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice low. She didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, "Somewhere they can't follow. If we make it in time." That last part made him glance at her. Her tone was not confident. It was a race, and she knew the odds. Somewhere above them, a heavy door slammed shut. The sound made her flinch, and she gripped his arm tighter. "They're closing the sectors. They're trapping us inside." The corridor opened into a vast, dimly lit chamber. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping water into shallow puddles on the floor. At the far end, a single circular door stood half open, releasing a faint mist. "Into the air, that's the way," she said, quickening her pace. But the moment they reached the halfway point, shapes began to emerge from the shadows around them. More hunters, this time without armor. Their pale skin stretched tight over long, wiry limbs. They moved on all fours at first, then rose slowly, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The unarmored hunters moved with a fluid, predatory grace, their clawed feet clicking against the wet floor. The girl froze for a split second, her hand drifting toward her coat, but she didn't reach for the pistol this time. Instead, she stepped slightly behind him, her voice low. "They're faster than the armored ones. Don't let them touch you." He didn't know why, but the warning made his chest tighten. The device's warmth was still inside him, steady and strong, and his instincts felt razor sharp. The first hunter lunged without sound, its movements so quick that most people wouldn't have seen it coming. But he did. His body moved before his mind caught up, sidestepping and driving his elbow into the creature's head with a crack. It stumbled sideways into a pipe, hissing as steam burst. Into the air, the others didn't hesitate. They charged together, claws flashing, their eyes glowing brighter in the mist. The girl shouted something in her language, and the hunters hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all he needed. He surged forward, grabbing the nearest one by the throat and slamming it into the ground so hard the metal rang. Another tried to leap onto his back, but he spun and caught it mid-air, hurling it into the wall. His movements were fast, almost too fast, like his body had been trained for years in a single moment. The girl ducked under a swipe from one hunter and kicked a loose pipe into its legs. Sending it tumbling, he finished it with a sharp strike that left it sprawled and unmoving. For a moment, the chamber fell silent except for the sound of dripping water. But he could hear more footsteps, faint but growing closer. "They're not stopping," she said, her voice urgent. "We have to reach that door before the next." Wave, they ran, splashing through puddles toward the circular door at the far end. The mist spilling from it was colder now, clinging to their clothes. He could feel the change in the air thinner, sharper, like stepping into a different world. Halfway there, the lights above flickered and died. The only glow came from his own faintly lit veins, the after effect of whatever she had done to him. It startled her enough to make her glance sideways, but she didn't slow down. The sound of metal scraping against the walls grew louder behind them. It wasn't footsteps this time, was something dragging itself toward them. He didn't look back, but he could feel its presence. Heavy and cold, they reached the door, and she pressed her palm against the panel. It didn't move. Her voice rose in frustration as she pressed harder, muttering under her breath, "They've locked it. They know we're here." The dragging sound was close now, almost right behind them. Without thinking, he stepped in front of her, ready for whatever was coming through the dark. A shape emerged from the mist at the far end of the chamber. It was taller than the hunters, its body covered in black. Glistening plates that pulsed faintly, its eyes locked on him, unblinking. The girl's hand closed around his arm, her voice tight. "That's not just a hunter. That's their executioner." The executioner stepped forward, each movement slow and deliberate, its claws scraping faint lines into the metal floor. The air felt heavier with every step it took, as if the whole room was holding its breath. The girl's grip on his arm tightened. But she didn't pull him away. Instead, she leaned close and whispered, "You can't fight it the way you fought the others. You have to use what I gave you." Her words sank into him like a command, and he realized this was the reason for everything she'd done. The executioner's head tilted slightly, its glowing eyes narrowing on the faint blue light in his veins. It let out a low, vibrating sound that rattled the pipes overhead. Then, without warning, it charged. The world seemed to slow as it moved. Its speed was impossible for something its size. But his body reacted on instinct, meeting its charge head-on. Their impact shook the chamber, sending ripples through the shallow water on the floor. He twisted, grabbing one of its plated arms and forcing it upward. The strength in his muscles unnatural but steady. The executioner roared, striking with its other claw, but he moved faster. Ducking low and driving his shoulder into its midsection, the plating cracked under the force. A faint blue liquid spilling onto the floor. The girl shouted something in her language, tossing a small cylindrical object toward him. He caught it without thinking. It was a concentrated pulse charge hit its core. She yelled, pointing to a faintly glowing spot just below its chest armor. He didn't hesitate. Using the momentum of the creature's own movement, he forced it to stumble forward in one motion. He slammed the charge into its core and twisted. A deafening crack split the air as the device detonated with a flash of blue light. The executioner staggered, its roar turning into a choking gasp before it collapsed into the water. Unmoving for a moment, there was only silence. Then the girl exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since he'd met her. "You survived," she said softly, almost in disbelief. Her gaze lingered on him, the faint glow in his veins slowly fading. "You're not just human anymore. And now they'll never stop hunting you." He looked at the fallen executioner, its body already dissolving into dark mist. "Then I guess you're stuck with me," he replied, his voice steady. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "Maybe," she said, turning toward the circular door. "But first, we get out of here." She pressed her palm to the panel again. And this time, the door slid open, releasing a rush of cold air. Beyond it was nothing but white mist and the faint outline of another world. Without another word, they stepped through. Together, leaving the hunters, the executioner, and the dark chamber behind. The door sealed shut behind them with a heavy finality, and somewhere far above, the alarms fell silent.